Hey guys, tonight we slip back into the steamy, strange and slightly damp world of Victorian self-care. The gaslights flicker, the chamber pots lurk under the bed, and in front of your warped bedroom mirror sits a peculiar little jar of snail cream. You open it. It's thick, slimy, slightly lemon-scented, but that could just be the lingering coal smoke. Yes, tonight you're testing the weirdest things Victorians did to keep themselves young. And believe me, you won't believe half of what's coming. Alright, before you get too cozy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, but only if your heart says yes. Post your local time and where you're listening from. I love seeing the global bedtime map. Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. You start the evening the way many respectable Victorians did, by brushing your skin with something resembling a hedgehog on a stick. It's called a flesh brush, and you're supposed to scrub yourself raw with it. Supposedly it'll drive blood to the surface, make your skin glow, and stimulate youthful circulation. What it mostly does is hurt. A lot. But the ache is oddly invigorating, and you convince yourself it's working. After all, if it hurts, it must be healing something. After brushing, it's time for the cold water, not a refreshing splash, mind you. No, Victorians loved a plunge. You step into a hip bath filled with water that hasn't seen the sun since Tuesday. Your breath catches, the porcelain bites into your thighs, the water clings like a punishment. Supposedly, this boosts your nervous vitality, and you do feel nervously alive. Somewhere in the chill, you remember the recommendation of one Victorian health guru who claimed that bathing in cold water every morning was the secret to perfect skin, boundless energy, and moral fortitude. His name, Thomas Wackley, editor of The Lancet and notorious for saying a brisk dip was better than any doctor. You wonder if he ever actually tried it in a London winter. Once you've escaped the clutches of your icy bathtub, you towel off quickly with a piece of linen stiff as a canvas tent. Your next move? Face cream. But not just any face cream. The little glass jar on your vanity contains a mixture that's been sitting there all day. It's called snail ointment, made from crushed snails. Yes, actual garden snails, mixed with almond oil and rosewater. It's the latest in youth-preserving miracles. The Victorians didn't entirely understand collagen, but they sure loved natural mucilage. You scoop a dab of it, ignoring the faint greenish shimmer, and smooth it across your cheekbones. It's slick, cold. You smell faintly like both a florist and a swamp. You keep going. Beauty is pain, or slime, or both. Some women in fashionable circles claim it removed wrinkles. Others claimed it gave them the dew of a maiden's bloom. Few probably just enjoyed saying snail mucus at tea parties. But the trend caught on, even showing up in adverts in Ladies' Treasury next to ads for hair restorers made of beef marrow. And then there's the cucumber mask, not cucumber slices. Oh no! This is a full-on mush of boiled cucumbers mixed with milk and chalk powder. You apply the paste, then sit stiffly by the window like a haunted statue, letting the concoction harden. Someone down the street whistles. You shut the curtain. Before bed, you complete the ritual with a tonic. It's made of elderflower, orange peel, and something labelled only as restorative spirits. You sip it. It burns your throat, but you feel warm, glowing even. That could be the snail mucus, though. It's a strange routine, but you almost understand it. Victorians were terrified of decay, of death, of looking tired, poor, or old. Anything that promised youth, even if it crawled across the garden wall, was worth bottling. And so, with your skin slick and tingling, you slide beneath the covers and imagine you've bought yourself one more wrinkle-free day. At least until the snail cream melts into your pillowcase. The next morning your pillowcase smells faintly of a salad left out in the sun. You peel yourself off the sheets, your cheek vaguely sticky, and begin again. Because Victorians weren't just obsessed with what you put on your skin. They were equally fixated on how you slept, breathed and moved, all in the name of staying youthful. You throw open the window, just like one of those health columnists advised in the penny magazine. Stale indoor air causes premature lines, they warned. So even though the London air outside smells like a soup of soot, sewage and horse breath, you let it in. Better that than wrinkles, apparently. You move on to your facial gymnastics. Yes, Victorians had an entire theory about exercising the face. You practice puckering, stretching, lifting your eyebrows, and squinting in a particular pattern, like a mime rehearsing for a role in a tragedy. It's supposed to keep your muscles youthful and perky. You just hope no one walks in while you're mid-grimace. One ladies' magazine even recommended blowing up balloons daily to strengthen the cheeks and prevent sagging. You find one under your dresser, left over from a children's party maybe, and give it a try. After 2 puffs, your head spins and you deflate faster than the balloon. Now, breakfast. You reach for a strange tin marked youth gruel. It's a blend of oats, ground almonds, and cod liver oil. Rich in nutrients, said the ad, and known to bring back the roses of the cheeks. You take 1 bite. It's like licking a fish that fell into your porridge. But Victorians believed it was better than aging. As you chew, you scan the back of the tin, where someone has scribbled a recipe for skin-beautifying broth. It includes veal bones, juniper, and a dash of something called hartshorn jelly, a substance boiled down from deer antlers. Supposedly it made hair grow, skin glow, and joints supple. Mostly it made kitchens stink. Still, there are stories of noble ladies who drank it religiously, convinced it brought them extra years of beauty. You imagine them sipping from porcelain teacups, pinching their noses to avoid the reek, and smiling politely as their maids gagged in the hallway. Later, you pass your neighbour Mrs. Galley on the stairs. She eyes your glowing cheeks suspiciously. "You're looking a bit dewy," she says. You nod, trying to hide the faint trail of snail cream that hasn't fully rinsed off. "New face tonic," you mumble. She leans closer. "Is it the one with sulphur? I heard the French like that." And just like that, a new product is on your mind. You dig out an old vial from the washstand drawer. Madame Duval's elixir of eternal bloom. It's French, yes, and contains sulphur, rose water, and something that smells suspiciously like boiled eggs. You splash it on and hope for the best. By dusk your skin is radiant, or irritated, or both. But one thing's certain. The ritual makes you feel like you're doing something, like you're holding back time, not with grand gestures, but with cold baths, wrinkled cucumber paste, and the ghost of a snail or two. And really, isn't that the Victorian spirit? If it's weird, smells bad and takes forever, it must be working. You wake before dawn, heart pounding from some dream involving icicles and screaming. As it turns out, it wasn't a dream at all. It was the second meeting of your newly joined health society, the Ice Bath Brotherhood of Bloomsbury. Yes, there was a real club for this sort of thing. More than one, in fact. The Victorians loved to organise themselves into groups with lofty names and very cold habits. You, unfortunately, have committed to their Wednesday immersion vigil, and it starts now. You drag yourself out of bed, dress in wool underclothes, and head to the garden where an iron tub waits. It's been sitting out all night, collecting dew and disappointment. You run your fingers along the surface. There's actual frost forming. Wonderful. The president of the Brotherhood, Mr. Hugh Terence Foyle, a man whose moustache is frozen into 2 thin knives of authority, gives you a firm nod. "Shall we purify?" he says. You nod, regretfully. The other members, mostly gentlemen of leisure, retired colonels and one barber, stand ready in their flannel robes. Some of them hum a patriotic hymn. Mr. Foyle reads aloud from a small booklet titled Vital Strength, the Cold Baptism of Modern Man. You've heard his speech before. Cold preserves the skin, sharpens the mind, stiffens the spine, and keeps your manly vigour from seeping out with age. You think he made that last part up, but no one argues with a man who bathes in freezing water before breakfast. Then it's time. One by one, the men drop their robes and step into their tubs like condemned prisoners entering a damp grave. You follow. Your skin screams. Your lungs seize. Somewhere in your brain, a single voice whispers, "Why?" But you know why. Because Victorian society believed warmth made you weak. The upper classes associated sweating with labourers and criminals. To be cold and composed was to be civilised and eternally young. One doctor in 1843 even wrote that youth thrives in bracing climates and shuns the enervating comfort of hearth fires. You wonder if he ever fell into a frozen pond. When it's over, you wrap yourself in a scratchy towel and accept a cup of something called juniper infusion, which tastes like regret soaked in gin. Mr. Foyle claps you on the back, which somehow hurts worse than the water. "You'll feel like a boy of 20 by sundown," he says cheerfully. "Or die trying," you mutter. The group disperses as steam rises from your shivering forms. No one speaks of the fact that last week's youngest member developed chilblains so fierce his toes turned purple. He still attends, hobbling nobly with a cane carved into the shape of Poseidon's trident. As you limp home, your joints stiff and your dignity damp, you reflect on something one of the old members said last week while squeezing his feet back into leather boots. The secret isn't in staying young, it's in looking like you're fighting the decay with honour, and in some cold, painful way, it almost makes sense. You spend the rest of the day with a strange buzzing under your skin. Whether it's nervous vitality or early-stage hypothermia is unclear, but the Brotherhood would call it progress. You wrap yourself in your thickest wool and sip broth laced with mustard seed. Another recommendation from the club's wellness pamphlet. Stimulates internal combustion, it claims. Judging by your burps, it might be right. Later that evening, you attend the Society's indoor lecture series. Tonight's guest speaker is an eccentric man named Dr. Balric Glass, self-proclaimed expert on thermal rejuvenation. He wears tweed from throat to ankle and smells faintly of camphor and burnt sugar. He stands beneath a flickering gas sconce and begins, "The secret to eternal youth," he says, "is to confuse the body. First cold, then heat, then fear. Repeat." No one blinks. He introduces a device called the hot-cold alternation engine. It resembles a coffin crossed with a pipe organ. You're invited to enter. Inside, jets blast you with icy mist followed by scalding air. Your skin prickles, retracts, expands. You emerge pink as a lobster and equally cooked. Applause echoes. You bow instinctively. Dr. Glass offers you a pamphlet. "You've just awakened the primitive skin spirit," he says. You smile politely and vow never to awaken anything again. On your way out, you pass a portrait of the club's founder, Sir Hector Penwhistle, who reportedly swam the Thames every January until he caught pneumonia and died at 37. His legacy is preserved in oil paint, cheeks red, hair stiff with frost, eyes bulging with frozen optimism. In the hallway, another member offers you a small tin marked Eternal Youth Ice Rub. It's a menthol blend of eucalyptus, turpentine, and powdered alum. You apply a dab to your neck and immediately regret it. Your spine tries to leap out of your back. By the time you return home, your skin is glowing, your nose is numb, and your sense of pride is oddly intact. You have suffered, therefore you are preserved. You slide into bed and realise something else about this peculiar obsession. It wasn't just about youth. It was about control. The Victorians lived in a world they couldn't tame. Disease, decay, time, all looming uncontrollably. But if they could master cold water, discipline their nerves and shout, "Invigorate," while shivering in a tin bath, maybe they could pretend they had power over aging itself. And in a way, so do you. As your heartbeat steadies beneath thick blankets and your breath curls into the winter dark room, you let yourself believe, for just a moment, that your cells are younger than they were yesterday. Then the alum rub makes its way into your armpit creases and you shriek softly into your pillow. The day begins with a glimmering powder in a china dish. You hold it up to the window light and watch it shimmer like moon dust. It's beautiful, until you remember what it's made of. Arsenic. Yes, that arsenic. In Victorian times, this deadly substance was regularly sold in tiny packets to women who wanted a pale, translucent complexion, untouched by age or sun. You've heard of arsenic wafers, arsenic soap, and arsenic water. Now, it seems you've acquired the most coveted form, arsenical complexion powder. The label promises lily-like brightness and youthful bloom. It does not mention organ failure. Still, you dab it onto your cheeks with the softest puff you can find. At first it tingles, like mint. Then it burns, like regret. But oh, what a glow! The pale, delicate look was all the rage. A sun-kissed tan meant you worked outdoors. A porcelain face, by contrast, meant you were refined, idle, and probably rich. In fact, one fashion writer in 1867 called the perfect youthful complexion the face of a thing not quite living. And who better to deliver that than poison? You continue your morning routine with a sip of arsenic solution number 2, mixed into a cube of sugar, just a drop. That's all it takes to clear the skin and purify the blood, according to a testimonial you found crumpled in an old vanity drawer. A certain Lady Maribel claimed she drank it every morning for 15 years and looked younger at 40 than at 20. You also read she died in a fainting couch after her teeth fell out. You choose not to dwell on that. In the mirror, your skin does look smoother, a little paler. You smile. Your gums don't bleed. Yet. Feeling bold, you decide to go out. You tuck the arsenic powder into your bag and head toward Regent Street, where chemists sell youth in bottles with names like Revivify, The Blush of Spring, and White Widow's Bloom. You pass a shop with a peeling sign that simply reads Venetian Secrets. Inside, behind the counter, an elderly man peers at you through clouded glasses. "You're looking for youth," he says without question. You nod. He offers you a box of lozenges wrapped in violet foil. "These are infused with chalk, arsenic, and just a hint of opium," he says. "A lady's breakfast." You don't ask what lunch looks like. You buy one and place it under your tongue. It melts like chalk and violets. Your heart flutters slightly, though from anxiety or beauty is hard to say. As you walk home, you pass a group of girls fanning themselves in a park. One whispers, "She looks like a doll." You pretend not to hear, but tuck the compliment into your sleeve like a pressed flower. The powder's doing its job. You look fresher, softer, slightly ghostly, but in the flattering way. But even as you admire your reflection in a shop window, part of you wonders, how many of the lovely faces you pass are being eaten from the inside out? How many glowing cheeks are hiding, trembling? Fingers? Because the thing about arsenic is, it doesn't kill you all at once. It takes its time, like age. Back at home, you collapse into your favourite chair, flushed from compliments and chemicals. The mirror across the room catches your eye. You rise and approach slowly. The arsenic is working. Your cheeks are smooth, pale, timeless. But there's something else. A dryness at the corner of your mouth. A faint darkening under the eyes. You lean closer. Your pupils seem wider than normal. You blink. Once, twice. The tin of arsenical complexion powder still sits open on your vanity, its edges crusted like sugar left in the rain. You gently press the lid shut. Suddenly your thoughts are interrupted by the sound of your neighbour, Miss Claribel Dawes, arriving downstairs. She's always loud and always beautiful. The type who wears corsets tight enough to faint on cue and claims her skin stays smooth from goat's milk alone. But you've seen the greenish glass bottles she hides beneath her sink, labelled in cursive, tincture of Fowler's. That's arsenic too, in a more concentrated form. Fowler's solution was prescribed by doctors for everything from asthma to acne. It was clear, tasteless, and nearly invisible in tea. Entire households dosed themselves in secret, believing the poison would thin the blood, brighten the skin, and fortify the nerves. Children took it. Men took it before dinner parties. One newspaper even suggested it as a tonic for elderly gentlemen wishing to regain their courtly colour. You pour yourself a cup of weak black tea and stare into its surface. No Fowlers today. Just a splash of milk and a mental note not to lose your teeth before Thursday. But here's the thing. Arsenic had defenders, enthusiasts. There were entire circles of women, quiet, refined, powerful, who whispered dosage notes to one another at dinner. Only on Mondays. Never mix it with brandy. One drop more and I couldn't feel my toes for a week. It was a cult of pale-faced youth, wrapped in lace and death. And the oddest part? It worked, at least for a while. The skin truly did appear clearer. Redness faded, blemishes vanished. The Victorian bloom wasn't just metaphor, it was slow chemical warfare waged against time. You think back to the powdered faces at the opera, the way the gaslight reflected off their cheeks like porcelain, the way no one dared sweat or smile too wide or eat too heartily. Everyone watching everyone else for cracks, not just in character, but in the illusion of youth. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. It wasn't the poison, it was the silence. No one admitted they were dosing. No one said aloud, "I'm afraid of getting old." They just smiled behind their fans, sprinkled arsenic across their toast, and whispered about how lovely the moon made them look. You blow out the candle and lie in bed, the taste of violet and chalk still on your tongue. Somewhere beneath the powder and potions, your real skin waits patiently. You're back at the dressing table again, but this time it isn't your skin you're worried about. It's your insides. You've read it in the columns, overheard it at dinner parties, even caught the whisper from a passing apothecary. True youth comes from within, and according to half the Victorian health gurus in London, that means cleaning your organs, balancing your humours, and drinking some truly regrettable things. You start with charcoal, not the kind for fires, but powdered, purified charcoal in little paper packets. You sprinkle a pinch into a glass of tepid water. It clouds like ink. You stir, sip, gag. The texture is chalky and strange, like drinking soot and mud. But the pamphlet said it would absorb toxins and make your blood clean as a spring brook. Whatever that means. Victorian medical thinkers were obsessed with internal purity. They believed most signs of aging, wrinkles, fatigue, bad breath, even sadness, came from something putrid inside the body. So of course, to stay young, you had to purge it. You try the vinegar next. A spoonful of cloudy cider vinegar in water. It tastes like regret and burned apples. You chase it with warm lemon and a cube of dry toast, also in the guide. This morning's inspiration came from Dr. Catherine Bishop, a formidable woman with a passion for internal correction. She promoted a daily routine of vinegar drinks, lemon gargles, and something called chalk paste. You glance at the recipe. It includes crushed chalk, milk, and a single egg yolk. You stir it up, look at the clumpy mess, and bravely take a spoonful. Your stomach protests. but your skin does seem firm or tense or afraid. You spend the next hour pacing and burping lightly, hoping nothing comes back up. Outside, children are skipping rope in the lane, rosy-cheeked and filthy. You envy them. No powders, no vinegar, just knees scraped on cobblestones and hair stiff with sweat. But you remind yourself, they don't have crow's feet yet. Your next trial is blood-cleansing tea. It's a home blend of burdock root, cleavers and sarsaparilla. Bitter, earthy, makes your tongue curl. The label says it promotes youth by purging the liver and restoring the juices of youth. You're not sure what those juices are, and honestly, you're too afraid to ask. A note scribbled in the corner suggests adding a pinch of Epsom salts for accelerated purity. You pass. You remember something from a gossip circle at the grocer's. A woman in Chelsea had such devotion to these tonics that she fainted while trying to carry her own laundry and had to be revived with smelling salts and raw egg. When asked if she regretted it, she replied, "Not if it gave me even one wrinkle less." You sit with that thought. How far would you go to erase one line from your forehead? One crease from the corner of your eye? You take another sip of vinegar water. The answer clearly is pretty far. By late afternoon, your tongue feels slightly furry. Whether from the charcoal, the chalk, or the sour vinegar you've been sipping all day, you're not sure. But you don't stop, because now it's time for the real cleanse. You pull a small wooden box from beneath your bed. Inside is a bottle labelled Dr. Elric's Elixir of Renewal. The label is cracked, the font impossibly ornate, and the contents thick and dark. It smells like licorice, rust, and something medicinally suspicious. The ingredient list boasts senna, rhubarb, calomel, and a whisper of opium. You hesitate. Calomel is mercury chloride. Senna is a harsh laxative. You take a tiny sip anyway. Victorians called this kind of concoction a physic, meant to flush the system, purify the blood and rid the body of melancholic vapours. You call it a one-way ticket to the privy. Within minutes your stomach gurgles like distant thunder. You light a candle and clutch the windowsill for balance. As the elixir works its way through your system with merciless efficiency, you recall reading about Queen Victoria's own fascination with digestive health. Her physicians often prescribed bitters, mineral waters, and mild purgatives to maintain intestinal grace. Some sources even claimed she insisted her ladies-in-waiting maintain similar routines, because nothing says youthful glow like synchronized bowel discipline. You breathe through the cramps. You tell yourself that this too is youth, that somewhere deep in the folds of your bowels time is retreating. Later, pale and drained, you lie on the settee sipping barley water, too tired to read. A breeze passes through the half-open window. You catch your reflection in the glass, your cheeks flushed, your eyes watery. But your skin, yes, your skin does look clearer. But there's something else, something behind your expression. Not just the determination, or the discomfort, or even the stubborn vanity. It's a kind of belief that suffering equals progress, that if it's painful, bitter, and nearly unbearable, it must be working. You recall a line from the family health manual tucked under your cushion. True youth must be earned by the virtues of self-discipline, internal order, and frequent purgation. You laughed when you read it. Now it rings like gospel. That night, as you lay curled under heavy wool, you vow to cut back tomorrow. Fewer drops of elixir, maybe half the chalk paste. Maybe, but then again, the skin under your eyes does look tighter, and you haven't sneezed once. You close your eyes, heart fluttering like a canary in a mine, and drift off to sleep dreaming of brighter eyes, tighter pores, and the cool clarity of a well-purged soul. You wake to steam, not the gentle kind wafting from a tea kettle, but the thick, damp, scented clouds of a Victorian Turkish bathhouse. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your very thoughts. You blink through the haze, disoriented, your skin immediately damp and warm. So warm. You've come here voluntarily to sweat. This isn't some grimy public bath. This is the elegant candlelit sanctuary known as the Imperial Vapour Rooms, tucked discreetly behind a row of shops in Mayfair. You had to be invited by a friend of a friend, and only after you'd promised not to complain about humidity. Your shoes are already off, your body wrapped in a thin linen robe. The marble underfoot is warm. The room pulses with gentle drips, the echo of ladles on stone, and the occasional sigh of a gentleman who's decided to sweat his way into his 40s and beyond. Turkish baths were a Victorian obsession. Imported, repackaged and sanitized for the British elite, they promised everything from clearer skin to better circulation, increased virility, and, of course, a prolonged sense of youthful vitality. No one quite knew how or why it worked, but the combination of heat, water and social gossip seemed irresistible. You move from the tepidarium, where you've been lounging in light mist, to the caldarium, the hot chamber. It hits you like a furnace. Your lungs shrink. Your sweat pores erupt. You grip the wooden bench and try not to panic. A gentleman next to you nods politely. "First time?" he says. You nod, still steaming. He smiles and pours a ladle of eucalyptus-scented water over a pile of glowing stones. The steam rises in a rush. "Good for the complexion," he adds. You want to ask how good it was for his now melting eyebrows, but instead you lie back and try to meditate. A pamphlet on the table outside, Regeneration Through Steam, claim that 10 sessions could restore the constitution of youth by removing waste from the tissues and restarting the humours. One testimonial read, "After a mere fortnight I looked 15 again and my wife spoke to me with fondness." It was signed only, "A Gentleman of Putney." You begin to sweat in earnest now. Not just perspiration, true Victorian perspiration. You imagine the poison draining from your skin. The arsenic, the vinegar, the regrets. You're melting yourself into a better version. Eventually an attendant appears with a small tray. On it is a glass of lemon barley water and a folded towel. He gestures for you to lie down on the marble slab, the friction table. Before you can protest, he begins scrubbing, vigorously, with a mitt made of loofah, sand, and possibly a cursed sea creature. Your skin comes alive in flashes of heat and rawness. He hums gently as he exfoliates every inch of dignity from your body. This, he says, is the youth extraction. He does not elaborate. You stagger back into the cool room afterwards, skin red, soul rearranged. The gentleman from earlier waves his hand dramatically and proclaims, "You've been reborn." You aren't sure whether to thank him or faint. You lie back, sweating in peace, and strangely, you do feel new. You sit cooling beneath a brass vent as condensation drips gently from the ceiling. Your skin tingles from the scrub. Raw, yes, but also polished, like an apple freshly wiped on a sleeve. Across the room, another client fans himself with a folded medical journal and murmurs something about steam vitality increasing lymphatic honesty. You don't ask what that means. The attendant reappears with a tiny bowl of greyish sludge. "Mud of youth," he says solemnly, "from the river Tone." You raise an eyebrow. He nods. "It's volcanic." You're quite sure the river Tone is in Somerset, and not particularly volcanic, but at this point, you no longer argue with damp strangers offering you rejuvenating sludge. The mud is warm, smooth, and smells faintly of peat and desperation. He smears it across your chest, arms and forehead with the solemnity of a monk. "It draws out time," he says. You wonder if he means metaphorically, or if your appointment is running over. He leaves you to bake in silence. Victorian steam temples like this one weren't just spas. They were temples of transformation. Gentlemen would sit for hours, wrapped in wool and wet towels, discussing everything from the latest colon-cleansing tinctures to their favourite varieties of goat's milk soap. Steam wasn't just steam, it was redemption in vapour form. You look around and notice a peculiar machine in the corner, a squat copper contraption with tubes, a foot pedal, and a brass plaque that reads, Rejuvenator number 7. You ask what it does. The attendant looks both proud and cautious. You sit on it, he says, and it directs steam upward, intensely upward. You sit very still and politely decline. Across the room, another gentleman coughs dramatically and announces that after just 6 sessions, his wife asked if he had started taking fencing lessons again. He smiles proudly. No one mentions his eyebrows appear to be slipping off his face in slow surrender. After your mud is set and cracked, the attendant hoses you down with what feels suspiciously like rainwater from a tin tank. You gasp, you sputter, you sparkle. Then comes the final step, a plunge into the frigidarium, a small pool of icy water inlaid with blue tile. You descend like a Roman senator preparing for martyrdom. Cold, 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 but the moment you surface, everything is sharper, brighter. The flickering gaslights above look like stars. Your fingertips pulse, your lungs feel clean, your skin tight. You're alive and young and possibly turning blue. You dry off slowly in a room that smells of lavender and eucalyptus. The attendant presents you with a slice of orange and a single sugared almond. A tonic for the new you, he says. You step out into the street an hour later, hair damp, cheeks glowing, linen sticking faintly to your back. Pedestrians glance at you with curiosity. A passing child tugs her mother's sleeve and says, "That lady looks shiny." You smile. You do look shiny. And underneath the shine there is a flicker, just a flicker, of something that might almost be youth. Or maybe it's just the afterglow of being steam-boiled, sanded and blessed with river mud. Either way, you're calling it a win. It starts with a bell. A soft chime at your door. Early morning. Far too early for deliveries. You shuffle to the entrance, still wrapped in a robe and slightly damp from last night's final cold compress. There, standing crisp and upright, is a young man in a blue waistcoat holding a wooden crate marked Dr. Medlock's Vital Energy Cabinet. Caution, sparks. You blink. He smiles. Installation included. You nod, which he takes as permission. Minutes later, your sitting room has been rearranged. In the centre stands a metal box large enough to crouch in, bristling with copper coils, rubber pads, and something that looks like a brass lantern crossed with a waffle iron. Wires trail from a central console that buzzes faintly, like bees trapped in a drawer. This is the latest marvel in Victorian electrical rejuvenation. A home medical cabinet said to harness the powers of galvanism to restore the skin, invigorate the spine, and reawaken dormant youthful energies. You're told to sit inside, place your feet on metal plates and press your back to the padded coil. There's a wooden dial marked mild, fair, brisk, daring and divine. Naturally, you start with mild. A jolt zips through your spine like an enthusiastic ghost tapping Morse code. You yelp. The young man, utterly unfazed, assures you this is normal. He adjusts a few wires and nods toward a thick, leather-bound manual sitting beside your tea tray. You flip it open to a random page. Chapter 6, on stimulating the feminine constitution through galvanic touch. The diagram looks suspiciously like someone ironing a petticoat, with electricity. Electric therapy was the medical fashion of the age. From arthritis to wrinkles, the Victorians believed a good zapping could solve almost anything. Some claimed it returned colour to greying hair. Others insisted it lifted sagging chins. The more daring sought internal rejuvenation, special belts and probes not fit for discussion in polite company. You're just hoping it firms your jawline. With hesitant fingers, you turn the dial to fair. Another jolt, sharper, livelier. Your fingers twitch, your toes tingle, your scalp prickles like champagne fizzing beneath your hairline, and you do feel something. Not youth, exactly, but aliveness. Across town, similar contraptions are lighting up parlours and kitchens. One woman you know swears by her electro-recliner, a velvet-upholstered chair wired to buzz politely for 10 minutes each morning. She claims it keeps her digestion cheerful. Another, a retired schoolteacher, straps 2 copper plates to her ankles nightly and sleeps with a current running through her calves. She says she hasn't had nightmares, or cramps, since. You sit inside your humming cabinet, wrapped in voltage and optimism, thinking back to the steam baths, to the cold plunges, the arsenic powder, all of it designed to awaken the parts of yourself that time dulled. Now you're waking them with lightning. 10 minutes later, the buzzing stops. You step out slowly, hair on end, heartbeat skipping like a music box winding down. The young man packs up his tools, bows slightly and says, "She'll sleep better tonight and rise younger in the morning." You aren't sure if he means you or the machine, but either way you already feel like your feet remember being 20 again. Evening comes, and the aftershocks still hum faintly beneath your skin. You sit at your writing desk trying to compose a thank you note to your cousin Isabel. She's the one who sent you that electric contraption as a gift. But your hand keeps twitching, making your pen loops a little too enthusiastic. You eventually give up and decide to read instead. A booklet slides from under your chair cushion. Modern Galvanic Beauty, the Science of Youth. You flip through the pages, and there they are. Portraits of ladies with wires pressed gently to their cheeks, eyes wide and dreamy, necks adorned with silk cords that lead to mysterious humming boxes. One image shows a woman in a corset seated beside a device labelled Womb Re-Energizer, patent pending. You slam the booklet shut and slide it under the rug. You're not quite that adventurous. Yet. Still, the Victorians weren't squeamish about applying electricity to almost anything. Entire clinics popped up across London offering electrotherapy sessions. A famous one in Harley Street claimed to reverse baldness, cure melancholia, and even soften crow's feet with electropatting, a mild shock delivered by gloved fingers. You test this idea using your copper kettle and a hairpin. The results are immediate and regrettable. You turn back to the safety of the vital energy cabinet. Its copper door catches the candlelight like something sacred. You crawl inside once more, this time with a slight smile, and crank the dial to brisk. A pop, a jolt, and warmth floods your limbs again, and suddenly you realize what this truly is. Not medicine, not science. It's hope, disguised as hardware. Because youth, you've come to understand, isn't just about skin or bones. It's a feeling, a flicker, a moment where your body forgets its own decline and pretends, just for a blink, that everything still works as it used to. You think of the older man who ran the electrical clinic on Baker Street. Rumour says he zapped his earlobes every morning while reciting poetry in Latin, swearing it gave him oral clarity and poetic resilience. You once passed him on the street and heard him muttering, "O tempora, O mores," as his eyebrows twitched like drumsticks. He seemed quite proud. And there's something admirable in all of it, isn't there? The absurd courage, the relentless tinkering, the willingness to wire oneself to a box and say, "Yes, I believe this will make me young again." You climb out of your cabinet, hair standing in small tufts, heart skipping a slow waltz. You smooth your dressing, gown, breathe deeply, and whisper, tomorrow. Divine. Then you laugh. Because maybe you finally joined them. Not just the ladies in the portraits, or the doctors with crackling machines, but the whole society of believers. The ones who refuse to grow old quietly. And maybe, just maybe, you'll grow younger loudly. It's late. Well past tea. And you're sitting at the far end of a long, creaky dining table in a townhouse that smells like varnish and secrets. The fire crackles gently behind you. A trio of port glasses glisten in the low light, untouched. And across from you sits a doctor. Not the kind with a stethoscope, but the kind with a gold cane, an unreadable smile, and a quiet voice that never quite rises above a whisper. He claims he's discovered something remarkable. You lean forward, intrigued. The conversation has wound its way through the usual. Vitality, glow, circulation, the fragility of time. But now he speaks of blood. Not just any blood, youthful blood. He doesn't say it directly, of course. That wouldn't be proper. He calls it transfusion rejuvenation therapy, a concept so new it hasn't yet made the pamphlet circuit. But the meaning is clear enough. Aged blood out, fresh blood in. Youngness transferred, like ink poured into a dry pen. You try not to stare. He tells you a story of a woman from Devonshire, pale and brittle, whose hands had curled like dried leaves. After a series of careful, balanced infusions, she returned to the piano. He claims she played Schubert for an entire hour. Her nurse wept. Her cat fled the room. She smiled for the first time in years. You ask quietly whose blood was used. He doesn't answer, just taps a finger on his cane. Willing parties, arrange with care. You think of the young, poor, often, apprentices, stable boys, maidens from the countryside brought in for domestic employment. You wonder how much they're paid, or if they're paid at all. Across Victorian London, rumours whisper behind fans and beneath parlour tables that Lady Amberson has a new wet nurse, though her children are grown. That Lord Kettering's valet is of unusually youthful constitution and prone to nosebleeds. That some houses hire not just cooks and footmen, but donors. Even the medical journals are catching on. One article in the London Examiner of Therapeutics posed the question, might not the spark of youth lie not in herbs nor waters, but within the very river of life itself? You lean back, chilled. The doctor pours himself a finger of port and offers you nothing. He's watching your hands, your skin, your pulse, maybe. I could arrange something, he says almost absently, if you're serious. You think about your mirror, the lines around your eyes, the tired ache in your hips when you climb the stairs. You think about all the things you've already tried, arsenic, vinegar, mud, lightning, and now this. You leave without giving him an answer. The fire pops behind you, as if in protest. But the idea follows you home, persistent as a candle flame in wind. That youth might be borrowed. That vitality might be transferable. That somewhere beneath your very skin time could be tricked, if only for a little while, by someone else's heartbeat. You can't sleep. The clock ticks louder than usual and your sheets feel too warm. You toss, turn, fluff, sigh. And still that word echoes through your skull like a softly spoken curse. Transfusion. It isn't a new idea, not really. As early as the 1600s, there were whisperings of it. Young blood used to calm madness, revive the old, or cure melancholia. But the Victorians, with their usual mix of optimism and morbid curiosity, took it further. They turned it into a fashionable silence. You sit up in bed and light a candle. Its glow casts your shadow large and flickering across the opposite wall. You study your reflection in the mirror above the fireplace. The lines are faint, yes, but they're there. You stretch the skin beside your eyes. Smoother, younger, but only until you let go. You pour yourself a small glass of claret even though it's past midnight. It tastes dry and a little metallic. You wonder, idly, if blood tastes like that too. You shiver. Downstairs the coals are still faintly glowing in the grate. You wrap yourself in a shawl and descend quietly, half expecting someone to be there waiting. But the drawing room is empty, except for the corner cabinet where your more peculiar beauty supplies are stored. A locked drawer, a velvet pouch. Inside, the doctor's card, embossed, thick, with a red ribbon folded inside. On it, written in delicate script, it is not theft, it is renewal. You almost laugh. Almost. You place the card on the mantel and stare at it for a long time. You remember the whispering you overheard last week at Madame Penwick's salon. A woman in a green silk gown had leaned too close to her friend and said, "You can always tell. The glow. It's unnatural, like candlelight behind skin." The friend nodded gravely and murmured, "I heard hers is barely 17. You didn't know who they were speaking of, but suddenly you'd noticed a certain hush around the more radiant women at these parties, those who looked fresh, in a way that seemed just a little too perfect. No powder, no rouge, just a flush. You trace the rim of your glass with your finger, and you ask yourself, not for the first time, what would you give to stay young? A morning? A month? A coin? A moral boundary? You imagine the doctor again, cane resting across his knees, waiting. There is always someone waiting. Someone young, someone in need. You place the card back in the drawer and close it, for now. Because tonight, though your skin still remembers the sting of steam, the tingling of current, and the grit of charcoal, something deeper has shifted. You've crossed no line, but you've seen it. You've looked over the edge, and once seen, it never disappears. You blow out the candle. Sleep doesn't come easy, but when it does, it brings a dream, not of wrinkles or time or mirrors, but of blood, and the strange, disturbing possibility that youth might not be earned, but taken. You're being crushed, slowly, elegantly, by silk, bone, and whalebone stays. The maid gives the corset strings another pull, and your breath vanishes like fog in winter. You clutch the bedpost, eyes wide, ribs protesting. She smiles sweetly and says, "Just 1 more inch, miss." You nod, because you've seen the fashion plates. You've read the etiquette guides. You know what youth is supposed to look like. Slim waist, high bust, straight back, chin lifted like you've just sniffed something beneath you. And in Victorian England, that silhouette didn't come from nature. It came from engineering. Corsets weren't just undergarments. They were armour. Sculptors of youth. Instruments of illusion that promised to reshape the passage of time itself. One breathless cinch at a time. You let her tie the final knot, then shuffle over to the mirror. The transformation is immediate. Your figure now boasts the coveted wasp waist. Your torso unnaturally narrow, hips flaring slightly, shoulders pulled back. You look younger, more vibrant, and slightly terrified. This is how Victorian women fought age, not by preventing its arrival, but by binding its evidence beneath yards of laced linen and whalebones. A sagging belly, tucked away, drooping posture, cinched straight, a chest losing its lift, hoisted and supported like a cathedral dome. You sit on the edge of your chair and try to sip tea. It doesn't go well. Your ribs press against your lungs. Your stomach has been flattened into compliance. You manage half a swallow before coughing into your napkin, eyes watering. "Lovely posture," says your friend Lady Eunice, seated across from you, fanning herself lazily. "You look positively youthful today." You nod, smile weakly, and pray you don't faint. Fainting, after all, is a known side effect. So common, in fact, that many ladies carried smelling salts in their reticules. Some even staged collapses for dramatic flair, especially when cornered by boring suitors or unflattering lighting. And then there's the skin. A youthful face, according to Victorian ideals, must be pale, deathly pale. You dab your cheeks with a damp cloth before powdering. Then, because you've heard the trick, you lean toward the fire for just a moment, letting the heat flush your skin with a natural glow. But even that's risky. Too much colour and someone might accuse you of being too alive. "Did you see Mrs. Holbrook at the theatre?" someone had whispered the other day. "She looked positively florid. It's not becoming. Not becoming." You wonder how many women disappear beneath these expectations, buried beneath layers of fabric, etiquette and expectation. But then you tug your gloves on, tilt your chin slightly higher and think, perhaps vanishing a little is the price of staying visible. As you step out into the chilly evening, corset tight, cheeks powdered, posture impeccable, you catch your reflection in a gaslit shop window. You look like porcelain, untouchable, uncrackable, unreal, and for a fleeting second, you look exactly how they want you to. You last precisely 43 minutes before the dizziness sets in. Standing in Lady Ashcombe's drawing room, nibbling at a biscuit the size of your fingernail, you feel the telltale signs of a corset too tightly laced. Cold fingers, spinning vision, and the distinct sensation that your lungs have been folded like a letter. You smile through it. Everyone does. Around you, the room glows with candlelight and conversation. Every woman here has done battle with time, under gowns of taffeta, behind veils of lace, but none speak of it. They speak of Paris, of piano recitals, of Miss Fenley's shocking new fringe. Not one breath wasted on aching ribs or the ache behind their eyes. You steady yourself beside a sideboard stacked with cucumber sandwiches and lemon water. A maid offers you a chair, but you decline. Sitting in a corset this tight would mean creasing the gown, and that, of course, is unforgivable. From across the room, Lady Winsley catches your eye. She gestures discreetly toward her own waist and mouths. "Steel." You mouth back. "Whalebone." She raises an eyebrow, impressed. It's the closest thing to camaraderie you felt all evening. But youth isn't just about waistlines. It's also about complexion. And so, you excuse yourself to the powder room, an actual room, with marble counters and perfume bottles lined up like soldiers in a floral army. There you perform the ritual. Powder, light as frost, rosewater behind each ear, a pinch of rice starch at the temples, and then the secret weapon, a dab of wax just beneath the cheekbones to reflect the candlelight upward. It lifts everything, cheeks, eyes, even mood. Back in the parlour you drift between conversations. Men nod politely, eyes flickering from your face to your figure and back again. They don't know it, but they're admiring architecture. Your scaffolding and illusion held up by laces and powder. But not everyone gets away with it. Mrs. Emmeline Hart arrives late. Her gown is wrinkled, her hair slightly askew, no corset, no powder, just a red scarf and an honest face. The silence when she walks in is heavy. "Gracious," someone whispers. "She looks comfortable." The word lands like a stone, because in this world comfort is the enemy of youth. Ease suggests age. Relaxation smells of surrender. The youthful never rest. They pose, they glide, they ascend staircases like mist. They never sweat. They barely breathe. You smile at Emmeline. She smiles back. And for a moment you feel something warm flicker beneath your ribs. A longing, maybe. But then Lady Ashcombe announces the next round of cards, and the moment passes like powder in the breeze. You stand straighter, tighten your gloves, reclaim your place in the grand illusion. And as the evening stretches on, you dance the slow waltz of youth and its impostors, floating, across carpet and conversation, your corset whispering with every breath you don't quite take. Because in Victorian society, you don't simply be young, you wear it, you stitch it into silk and bone, and every breathless moment is a little price paid for the privilege of being admired. It's morning again, and the light through your curtains is unforgiving. You've barely slept. Your waist still bears the faint red lines from last night's corset, and yet here you are, seated stiffly at your vanity, preparing for another illusion. But this time, it's your face. You lean close to the mirror and gently tug the skin at your jaw, upwards, firm, youthful. Then you let go, and it sinks back slightly, not dramatically, but just enough to bother you. That's when you reach into the narrow velvet box tucked at the back of the drawer. Inside, pins, strings, and something that looks suspiciously like fishing tackle. Welcome to the strange and delicate world of Victorian instant facelifts. A world of invisible thread, tape, and tiny hooks hidden beneath hairpieces, hats, and high collars. You begin by dabbing your temples with rose oil to soften the skin for anchoring. Then, following a sketch clipped from the Lady's Companion, you thread a length of fine silk through your side parting and behind your ears. A discreet tug, and your cheeks lift ever so slightly. Another pin at the crown, and your eyebrows take on a gentle arch. The effect is subtle, but undeniably smoother. This isn't new, not really. Women have been pulling, padding, and pasting their faces for centuries, but Victorians elevated it to an art of near invisibility. No evidence of the art must remain, one beauty manual warned. She must look refreshed, not reconstructed. You carefully place your hair over the silk threads and pin it with combs. Then, with almost surgical precision, you apply skin wax to the corners of your eyes, just a dab to smooth the creases. The wax is beeswax blended with lard and a trace of pearl powder. It softens with your touch, and under gaslight reflects just enough to suggest dewiness. You pause. In profile, you look awake, alert, a little unreal, like a photograph touched up by hand. Ah, photographs. That's another trick, isn't it? You walk over to the small cabinet by the window and pull out a tiny envelope. Inside is a carte de visite from 2 years ago, your official calling card portrait. It shows you looking younger, lips slightly pursed, cheeks gently retouched by the photographer's assistant with a soft pencil. You've had copies printed ever since. Anyone who meets you for the first time receives that version of you. A friend once joked, "I haven't aged in print since 78. You laughed, but quietly made a note to send your own portrait to the retoucher again next spring. Back at the mirror, you finish with a touch of blooming lotion. The bottle says it contains crushed violets, but it smells more like vinegar and cloves. No matter. It stings just enough to make your cheeks blush, and what is youth, if not an artificially coaxed flush? You fasten your collar, pin on your brooch, and smooth your skirts. The version of you in the mirror smiles. She's tighter, lifted, composed. She has no trouble sleeping, no regrets, no doubts. You glance down at the fine silk threads tugging gently at your scalp, then look away, because in this moment, under morning light, you are radiant, and you intend to stay that way, at least until sundown. Later that day, you find yourself at the photographer's studio again. It's a small, overheated room filled with lace curtains, painted backdrops, and the faint smell of collodion and developing chemicals. You've come to sit for a new portrait, one that reflects your current state of youth, the one you've carefully lifted, powdered, and pinned into place. The photographer, Mr. Bicknell, greets you with a courteous nod. He's a thin man with ink-stained cuffs and a fondness for saying things like, "Let's shave 10 years with just the turn of your chin, shall we?" He arranges you under the skylight, where the natural glow flatters your cheeks. Then he drapes a velvet cloth around your shoulders and begins the usual instructions. Chin up, eyes soft, mouth closed but not stern. That's it. Think of something light, something pretty. You think of your first corset. You think of the way your skin felt after that steam bath in Mayfair. You think of your favourite spoonful of pear jelly on a winter morning. Your lips curl into something between serenity and sadness. The shutter clicks. Bicknell doesn't stop there. He moves closer and applies a faint dab of powder to your nose. Then he gently tucks a stray hair beneath your collar. "We'll have Miss Penrose smooth the negative," he says, almost absently. "Lighten the shadows, soften the lines. Nothing unnatural, of course." Miss Penrose is the assistant, and her pencil is more powerful than time. She's responsible for the fine details, erasing under-eye circles, lifting jowls, sharpening eyes. Many a matron has walked into this studio looking exhausted and walked out, in print, looking like a Grecian statue bathed in morning light. Once your sitting ends, you're escorted to a waiting room with walls lined in the faces of women who never age. You recognise some. Lady Trelling, who hasn't looked that fresh in years. Mrs. Fanch, whose real hair has long since retreated but here flows in soft, convincing waves. Their printed selves smile back with timeless calm. This is the final mask, isn't it? You've lifted your face with thread, covered the rest with wax and powder, and now photographic immortality. A false youth preserved on cardboard, passed from hand to hand at dinners and salons. Some women have their calling card portraits updated every spring. Others keep the same image for decades, pretending time has simply been kind. One woman, you've heard, even faked her age so thoroughly that when she died, her husband wept over a portrait that was 20 years out of date. She never looked a day over 30, he'd said, because he never knew better. You leave the studio an hour later, holding a proof in your gloved hand. The woman in the image is you, but not quite. Her jawline a little cleaner, her gaze a little softer, her age a little lost in the shadows. You tuck it into your handbag and step out into the light, and for the rest of the day you carry that version of yourself like a charm. Because in Victorian society, time didn't just pass, it was negotiated, lifted, painted, pinned, printed. And as long as the printed version survived, perhaps you did too. It's market day in Soho, and you're surrounded by ruffled skirts, clattering boots, and the rising chatter of shoppers haggling over spotted apples and limp sprigs of mint. But you aren't here for groceries. No, you're here for structure. Specifically, padding. The kind that turns an ordinary figure into a youthful silhouette. A discreet boost here, a subtle enhancement there. You know the routine. You duck into a narrow little shop wedged between a tobacconist and a milliner. The awning reads Madame Laurey's Figure Restoration Boutique. Inside, the air smells of lavender and starch. Bust forms line the walls like mute spectators. There are drawers labelled hips small, calves firm, and even throat veils. You avoid asking about those. Madame Laurey herself greets you with a polite sniff. She's corseted within an inch of logic and wears a high chignon that seems to defy physics. Her face is powdered to matte perfection, her expression somewhere between a governess and a sculptor. "You've come to restore your proportions," she says flatly. You nod. She gestures to a curtained corner. You step inside and undress carefully, leaving only your chemise. She begins her work like a tailor, measuring silently, lifting arms, pressing lightly against your lower back. Then she opens a box and begins selecting items. First, hip pads. They're made of wool and cotton, firm but flexible, and tie around the waist like saddlebags. "Fuller hips," she murmurs, "suggest fertility and youth. The waist looks smaller by comparison. Next, a bustle. Light wire and horsehair, positioned just above your backside. Keeps the skirts high and bouncy," she says. "Young women bounce." You suppress a laugh. Then come the calf stuffers, small pillows strapped just below the knee to give shape to thinning legs. A little excessive, perhaps, but once hidden beneath the folds of your walking gown, the effect is startling. You look in the mirror. You're taller, curvier, somehow, springier. It's not you exactly, but it's a version of you, a younger one. One who has not yet spent 10 years sitting too long in too many stiff chairs. Madame Leray adjusts your sleeves, then offers one final accessory, a chest enhancer. It's a padded insert shaped like a modest hill of velvet, warm to the touch and filled with lamb's wool. You glance down at your own reflection, then back at the pads. "You're cool," she says. You nod once. When you step out onto the street again, no one stares, but several heads do turn, just slightly. You walk taller. Your skirt swings with a different rhythm. You pass a young man leaning against a lamppost. He tips his hat and says, "Morning, miss." You smile before remembering you're old enough to be his aunt. Or rather, you were, before the padding. Because in this city, youth isn't always about skin or eyes or hands. Sometimes it's about geometry. You arrive at the gallery just past 3 o'clock, swishing into the room with what can only be described as enhanced presence. Every step is padded, every turn perfectly weighted. You don't so much walk as glide, and with your newly boosted calves and precisely hoisted bustle, you draw just enough attention to feel noticed, but not accused. The walls are lined with landscapes and still lifes, but the real art hangs in the crowd, ladies constructed like mannequins, shaped into delicate silhouettes of someone they perhaps never were. The young whisper about fashion. The older women pretend not to hear. You drift among them like a secret. A woman in her 50s leans over a bowl of fruit painted in 1783. Her hair is piled high and suspiciously dark. Her cheeks puff ever so slightly. She catches you looking, then smiles. "Cotton," she says quietly, tapping her hip. "Yours?" "Wool," you whisper back, "with a touch of whalebone." She nods, impressed. This is the unspoken sisterhood of sculpted silhouettes. No one admits it aloud. No one confesses to buying calf pads or trimming bust inserts, or sewing extra ruffles where softness has vanished. But the signs are there, beneath gowns, behind gloves, stitched into seams, and sometimes, when two of you meet, there's a flicker of recognition, a quiet understanding. I see your art, and I respect it. But not everyone is so graceful. Mrs. Pentlow enters with far too much bustle and not enough skirt. The result is catastrophic. She looks like she's being followed by a collapsing sofa. Even the sculpted can miscalculate. Still, she smiles radiantly, oblivious or indifferent. Perhaps that's another kind of victory. Not perfect illusion, but perfect confidence. You return home that evening with your wool hip pads slightly misaligned but your spirits oddly high. You undress slowly, peeling away each layer of falsehood like a fruit being unwrapped, hip by hip, calf by calf, until only you remain. The mirror greets you with honesty, softer lines, a belly not quite flat, knees not quite firm, but the strangest thing is, after today, you don't mind as much. Because today you were admired, not just for beauty, but for boldness, for crafting something with intention, for being seen, even through a carefully arranged disguise. You hang the pads back in their drawer, nestled between sachets of lavender and a pair of unused elbow gloves. Then you exhale, fully, for the first time in hours, and as your ribs expand to their true, uncorseted shape, you smile in the dim light, because youth may fade. But the performance? That's eternal. There's a letter waiting for you on the hall table, heavy cream paper thick with the scent of lilac and something vaguely metallic. It's from your cousin Daphne. vivacious, wealthy, and tragically obsessed with teeth. You haven't seen her in months, ever since she moved to Bath to pursue advanced dental rejuvenation. You tear the envelope open with a butter knife. "Dearest," it reads, "I've done it. You must come at once. I've never looked younger in my life, and I'm down to just 6 molars." You sigh and pack a bag. The train ride to Bath is uneventful, save for a young man in the opposite seat who offers you a boiled sweet and calls you Miss, with such sincerity you nearly blush. Padding? Still working. Thread lifts, holding strong. You arrive just before tea and find Daphne in her drawing room reclined like a queen. She looks radiant. Her skin glows, her eyes sparkle, and her mouth, well, it's strange. She grins widely, too widely. The corners stretch like wax, and inside, gleaming in perfect rows, are brand new porcelain teeth. She claps her hands with delight. "Aren't they splendid?" You blink. "All of them?" She nods. "Well, most of them. I kept 2 at the back, just in case." Victorians had a complicated relationship with teeth. A mouth full of natural aging teeth, yellowed, crooked, or decaying, was considered ghastly. But pulling them all and replacing them with polished ivory or porcelain, divine, youthful, clean. And the practice was shockingly common. Many women, upon reaching a certain age, would visit their dentist not for cleaning, but for extraction. A full set, removed, replaced. You sit beside her on the tufted sofa as she fans herself. "I don't miss them," she says breezily. "The old ones maybe look tired, and there's something so invigorating about a smile that doesn't move." You study her. Indeed, her smile is perfectly still. Too still. It's fixed in place like a theatre mask, wide, confident, unreadable. She laughs, but the mouth barely moves. "I've even had a portrait done," she adds. "Come, I'll show you." You follow her down a hallway lined with mirrors, each one reflecting her gleaming, rigid grin. In the study, she unveils the portrait. It's lovely, but it doesn't quite look like her. Not exactly. Just a version. Later that night, you brush your own teeth more carefully than usual. You examine your molars under lamplight. They're not perfect, slightly uneven, one stained faintly from wine, but they're yours, still capable of chewing a crusty scone or biting your tongue when a suitor says something foolish. And yet, you think of Daphne's glow, her untroubled jawline, the way she floated through the room like nothing inside her could decay anymore. Because that's what this really is, isn't it? A rejection of time's erosion, a denial of breakdown, of fragility. In a world where youth was prized more than comfort, some chose to remove anything that dared remind others they'd been here a while, even if that meant smiling through porcelain and pretending nothing was missing. You stay the night in Daphne's guest room, unable to shake the image of her perfect porcelain smile. At breakfast she serves you soft-boiled eggs and white toast cut into trembling triangles. She herself nibbles delicately, carefully, methodically, never quite chewing. Her fork hovers like a stage prop. The toast disappears in tiny, choreographed bites. You try not to stare, but it's hard not to wonder, did she trade appetite for aesthetics? As she pours your tea, her voice is airy. "You must see Dr. Fawkes before you leave. He did wonders for my friend Edith. She's 70 but looks 40, smiles like an angel, chews like a rabbit." You laugh nervously. That afternoon, curiosity wins. You find yourself sitting in a bright white surgery near the Crescent, across from the infamous Dr. Fawkes himself. He's neat, pinched, and wears gloves so tight they might be painted on. His walls are lined with painted charts of gums, jaws, and terrifying little diagrams titled things like "The Aesthetic Bite Arc." He examines your teeth with clinical interest, making occasional approving grunts. "Still natural," he says at last, removing his spectacles. "Unfashionable, but admirable. He doesn't pressure you, he simply explains. A full set of porcelain dentures, he says, can be sculpted to mimic the smiles of youth. The gums will be a pleasing pink, the teeth a gentle ivory. No staining, no crookedness, no more mouth collapse, which he explains in terrifying detail. It's the arch that ages you, he says, tapping a skull on his desk. The way the mouth sinks inward as teeth wear and retreat. Replace them, and the lower face blooms back into its youthful posture. Think of it as scaffolding for the soul. You leave with a pamphlet and a faint ringing in your ears. Back at Daphne's, she's beaming, ever beaming. She shows you a velvet box lined with little compartments. Her old teeth, saved like souvenirs. One molar is darkened. A front tooth has a hairline crack. They look impossibly small, fragile, human. These, she says, are the past. My new smile is the future. You say your goodbyes and board the train home, the pamphlet folded tightly in your pocket. You read it twice before stuffing it into your handbag, buried beneath a sachet of lavender and last week's copy of the Ladies' Gazette. That night, brushing your own teeth, you look long into the mirror. You smile. It's a little crooked, but real. You think of Daphne sipping tea through porcelain gates, her grin wide and eternal. And for now, just for now, you decide to keep what's yours. Not because you fear the dentist, but because there's something quietly powerful in smiling with imperfection, in allowing the world to see your teeth and know that they've lasted this long, that they're still doing the work, and maybe, in some strange subversive way, that's its own kind of youth. You're hungry, not just peckish, but truly stomach-rumbling, bread-yearning hungry. And yet, here you are, seated before a plate of what looks like punishment in biscuit form. It's dry, pale, smells vaguely of ammonia and despair. You poke it with your fork. It doesn't yield. This is your lunch. It's called the Youth Cracker. You bought it from a discreet little health shop off Fleet Street, the kind with shaded windows and shelves full of chalk, sulphur lozenges, and pamphlets titled Digestive Elegance and Meals that Reduce the Face. The clerk wore spectacles and had a complexion like candle wax. You trusted him immediately. The cracker is made of bran, wheat dust, and alum for clarity. Clarity of what it didn't say. You chew, you regret. But the Victorians believed strongly in eating one's way to youth, or more specifically, not eating one's way to it. Fasting was fashionable. Emaciation was elegant. The slimmer the figure, the younger you appeared. Some called it the face diet, where meals were carefully chosen not for pleasure or nutrition, but for their effect on the cheeks and chin. Too many stews, jowls, too much meat, greasy skin, too much bread, puffiness, horror of horrors. So you follow the plan. You sip a cup of warm water with lemon peel. No sugar, of course. That would age the complexion. You nibble a slice of boiled celery. And for dessert, a cube of toasted crust spritzed with white wine vinegar and sprinkled with grated nutmeg. It tastes like the memory of food. But there were those who took things further. You remember hearing about Miss Lively Fenwick, a society hostess who refused to eat anything solid after the age of 40. She survived on beef tea, milk, and the occasional spoonful of blancmange. It was said that her skin remained wrinkle-free and her waist unchanged for 30 years, though she did once faint during a waltz and had to be revived with Madeira soaked into a sugared napkin. Your own stomach growls in protest. You ignore it and flip through the guidebook you picked up with the crackers. Cleansing meals for the aging lady. It includes recipes like clear onion water, boiled lettuce with pepper air, and poached parsley vapour with essence of nothing. You try not to weep. Dinner promises to be more of the same. A broth, a wafer, a stern warning not to indulge in evening starches, lest your face betray it by morning. You remember the joy of butter, the reckless pleasure of apricot jam on thick toast. You miss chewing. But when you glance in the mirror, your cheekbones are sharp, your jawline visible. Your eyes look larger somehow, or perhaps your face is simply shrinking around them, and maybe that's the point, to pare away everything extra, not just weight, but expression, appetite, self-indulgence, to become, in the eyes of society, disciplined youth, not by age, but by abstinence. You sigh, and nibble another corner of the cracker. It tastes like paper. But you are undeniably glowing. By the second week of your refinement regimen, the hunger has become a companion. Not quite pain, just a hollow presence. A soft echo under your ribs reminding you that beauty, like virtue, must be maintained with quiet suffering. You rise each day lighter, in both body and mind. Your skirts feel looser, your gloves slip on easier. The mirror is kind, at least in candlelight. You've even started keeping a little food diary, just like Lady Morton, who famously recorded every mouthful for 20 years and reportedly died with a waist still under 20 inches. Her final entry: 2 olives, 1 raisin, regret. Today, your breakfast consists of barley water and a teaspoon of powdered chalk stirred into milk. The magazine called it digestive illumination. You call it thick. But you sip it anyway, imagining it coating your stomach like a fine layer of whitewash. For lunch, you try a fashionable new tonic called Tincture of Clear Essence. It's sold in tiny blue bottles and promises to suppress hunger, brighten skin, and calm distracting thoughts of pastry. The label doesn't list ingredients, but the second sip makes your fingertips tingle. So it's working. You write in your diary, no bread, no fruit, cheeks appear tauter, mind sharp, desire, persistent. Because you do desire, not just food, but warmth, bread, a soft-boiled egg with salt, but also, paradoxically, the sensation of discipline, that strange, hollow pride of withholding. You've begun to associate the growl in your belly with success. Each rumble is a reminder. You're not aging today, and you're not alone. At Mrs. Hale's afternoon salon, the ladies pass around cups of rose-petal broth and compliments about one another's wrists. "Have you lost weight?" someone coos to you. You smile modestly. "Oh, just water and starch," she gasps. "Starch? At your age?" Later, while sipping boiled fennel water, you overhear a whisper about Mrs. Hemming, how she's been sneaking sardines at midnight. "No wonder her chin's come back," someone mutters. The fear of the double chin hangs over the tea room like a thundercloud. You look down at your own plate, empty except for a single radish cut into a decorative rose. You place your fork beside it. You've had enough. You are enough. At least until supper. That night you dream of apples, not polished and sliced, but whole, bitten into with abandon. You wake with your tongue pressed to your teeth, hungry and a little ashamed. Still, the mirror tells you a different story. Your eyes are brighter. Your cheekbones cut a sharper line. The bones of your collar are visible, elegant, bird-like. You pull on your gloves with ease. Fasten your brooch without strain. And as you step into the pale morning, you carry yourself like someone who has earned her beauty, bite by missed bite. Because in this world, youth isn't nourished. It's carved, one skipped biscuit at a time. The envelope is thick, wax-sealed, and stamped with a foreign postmark. You open it slowly. Inside is an invitation. Ivory cardstock, gold ink, faint trace of cigars, and something zoological. At the bottom, Dr. Leontius Arkwright cordially invites you to an evening lecture and live demonstration of youth by glandular revitalization. Private salon, strict dress code, curious minds only. You've heard whispers of this man, a travelling surgeon-philosopher, a self-styled pioneer of internal rejuvenation. He's returned from Paris, or was it Vienna, with something new, something bold. You RSVP without hesitation. The event is held in a grand Kensington townhouse, its drawing room converted into a kind of gilded operating theatre. Velvet drapes, crystal decanters, too many chairs for comfort. The guests are an odd mix: curious debutantes, aging baronesses, physicians with moustaches like hedgehogs. Everyone sips diluted sherry and pretends not to be terrified, and then he enters. Tall, leonine, hair greying at the temples in a perfectly symmetrical pattern. Dr. Arkwright smiles faintly, as though in on a joke only he finds funny. He gestures for quiet, then begins. "Youth," he says, "is not a mood, it is not a shape, it is not a potion or a powder. Youth is function." He pauses. "And what governs function?" he asks, raising one gloved hand. "The glands." Murmurs ripple through the room, he explains. Glands, particularly reproductive ones, are the engines of youth. As they decline, so does everything else: skin, hair, energy, memory. But what if they could be replaced, restored, reignited? Which brings us to monkeys. He unveils a brass tray covered in linen. Beneath it, vials, instruments, a small jar labelled simply simian tissue, preserved. You feel your stomach turn, but your curiosity anchors you to the chair. Arkwright describes a procedure in which glands from young monkeys, usually testicular, are surgically implanted into aging men. A transfer of vitality, he calls it, the essence of virility unbottled. He doesn't mention women until prompted. "Ah," he says, turning toward the inquiry. "For the feminine constitution, we are exploring alternate sites, the thymus, the ovary, even glands of the scalp. Early results are promising." He motions toward a woman seated quietly in the corner, veiled. She stands, removes the veil. She's older, but her skin smooth, her hair glossy, her gaze frighteningly alert. The room gasps. You glance around and realize half the women present are now leaning forward, their fans lowered, their eyes fixed on Arkwright like parishioners before a prophet. He continues. He speaks of tissue injections, of monkey-to-man transference, of future treatments with no surgery at all, just distilled extracts in carefully dosed vials. Picture a future, he says, where a drop of youth is all it takes. The lecture ends with polite applause and several hastily scribbled notes from the attending doctors. You remain seated, unmoving, your equal parts fascinated and horrified. Later, by the refreshments, you overhear a viscount inquire discreetly about private consultations. Dr. Arkwright nods, hands him a calling card. It reads only, "Restoration, confidential, precise." As you leave, the night air feels sharper than usual. You glance at your hands in the lamplight. The skin is thinning, the veins more visible. You press your gloves on tighter. You don't know if you believe him. But a part of you, some quiet, desperate chamber of your mind, wonders, what if he's right? What if youth isn't behind you, but waiting in a jar? You don't sleep that night. The image of that veiled woman, smooth-faced, serene, unnervingly radiant, drifts behind your eyelids every time you close them. You toss beneath the sheets, heartbeat quickened by something that feels too sharp to be envy and too curious to be fear. By morning, the world feels different, or maybe you do. You sip your tea slowly, thumbing the edge of Dr. Arkwright's card. It's heavy, unmarked on the back, save for a single embossed word in gold: revive. The idea lingers longer than it should. Later that week, you attend a small salon hosted by a certain Lady Durrant, a known collector of fringe medical men and avant-garde ideas. There, between performances on the harp and tiny salmon sandwiches, the topic turns, inevitably, to glandular rejuvenation. Lady Durrant leans in conspiratorially, her eyes sparkling beneath overdrawn brows. "I've had it done," she whispers. You blink. "Truly?" She nods. "Just a small injection, nothing surgical. Extract of simian pineal, they say. Cost an arm and a pearl necklace." She sips her cordial. "But I feel marvellous. No more fogginess. My knees, springy as ever. And my husband keeps asking if I've had my portrait retouched." She fans herself as though her youthfulness might burst into flame. Others chime in. One woman claims she has received thymus oil infusions from a discreet doctor in Brighton. Another swears by a monthly suppository composed of goat adrenal. No one laughs, no one blinks. This is the new frontier. One gentleman, a military type with a bristled moustache and too tight gloves, mutters that he's booked an appointment with Arkwright himself. "Anything to get the old legs back," he grumbles, "even if they're monkey legs by proxy." You sip your drink and pretend not to notice your own hands tightening around the glass. At home that evening you draw the curtains, light a single candle and sit before the mirror. You study your face, not cruelly, not longingly, just honestly. The skin under your eyes has begun to loosen. Your jaw isn't as firm as it was last spring. There's a dullness creeping into the whites of your eyes, the sort of fading only you would notice. You retrieve your beauty case, powders, threads, waxes, and begin the familiar rituals. But something's changed. There's a new question now, whispering at the edges. What if something else could fix this? Not disguise it, not pinch or paint or pull, but reverse it. Not just silk and shadow, but biology, blood, cells, glands. You shake your head. It feels grotesque. Mad, but not impossible. You tuck Arkwright's card back into your vanity drawer and shut it with deliberate care. It makes a quiet click, the kind that says, "Not yet." But you know, deep down, that "not yet" is only ever a kind of waiting room. And if the years keep pressing in, you might just open that drawer again. It begins with a tingle, just a subtle prickle at the edge of your scalp, like a sneeze that never arrives. You reach up, fingers combing through your hair, and there it is, the spot. A place where the strands feel thinner, where your scalp peeks through more than it used to. You freeze, and then you remember the pamphlet. It arrived tucked into a parcel from your cousin, Dr. Brandish's Complete Guide to Follicular Reawakening. Inside, promises of regrowth, vibrancy, youthful sheen. The drawings are both charming and vaguely alarming. Cross-sections of scalps blooming like flower beds, tiny arrows suggesting the movement of vital oils. You set an appointment. The clinic is on the second floor of a quiet building near Piccadilly, sandwiched between a place that sells imported wigs and a tea room notorious for weak scones. The waiting room smells faintly of lavender oil and hot iron. You're led to a velvet chair with a leather headrest. A man in starched sleeves approaches, his hands full of metal tools that resemble something between gardening forks and miniature harpoons. "This won't hurt," he says. "Much." And so it begins. He starts with the scalp rake, a thin wand fitted with tiny wheels that spin as he rolls it across your head. It scratches, tugs, pulls at invisible sins. "The stimulation," he explains, "wakes the follicles. We must remind them they're still capable of life." Then comes the tonic. It smells like coal smoke and crushed mint. He massages it in with firm fingers, muttering encouragement to your pores. "Up you come. Wake up now. No more sleep for you." After that, the comb current, an electrified tool that crackles with static as he runs it through your hairline. Each pass brings a tiny jolt, like a bee brushing your scalp. Your ears ring faintly, your eyes water, but you don't stop him, because you've heard the stories. Women who regrew their youthful curls, men whose temples filled in like overwatered gardens. A certain duchess who claimed to have reversed 15 years of hair loss in just 6 sessions. "My hair came back," she'd said in a letter to the Ladies' Chronicle, "and so did my husband." The treatment continues for nearly an hour. Afterward your scalp burns slightly, and your hair is damp with whatever concoction he's slathered onto it. He wraps your head in a muslin scarf and gives you a small bottle for home use. "Apply nightly," he says, "even Sundays." That night you sit before your mirror, unwinding the scarf with trembling hands. Your hair looks wild, slightly frizzed, smells faintly of pepper and turpentine. You smooth it gently and peer closer. Are there more hairs than before? Is the part line narrower? Or is that just hope? You sleep sitting up, afraid to disturb the magic. And in the morning, as you rinse the night's elixir from your scalp, you feel it again, the tingle, the spark, not just in your hair, but in you. Because nothing says youth quite like the promise of something still growing. By the end of the week, the routine has become ritual. You rise, unwrap your head from its muslin cocoon, and anoint your scalp with Dr. Brandish's follicular bracer. It's thick and yellowish, smells faintly of vinegar and pine tar, and leaves a tingle that stays with you till lunch. You've begun brushing your hair with more purpose, counting each stroke, 100 in the morning, 100 at night, just as the pamphlet prescribed. Stimulation brings circulation. Circulation brings renewal. You whisper it aloud like a prayer, brush in hand while the housemaid knocks politely before entering, careful not to interrupt the ceremony. Even your hairpins seem to slide in more confidently now. Or perhaps it's just your posture, slightly straighter, more alert. Hope has a curious way of lifting not just spirits but shoulders, and you're not alone. At Madame Pell's Tuesday gathering, you notice the signs. Ladies with suddenly glossier partings, men with slightly more deliberate comb-overs, a general sheen of effort, as if everyone's scalps have recently been woken up from some long Victorian nap. Lady Fernley leans toward you over her card hand and whispers, "I've switched to calf marrow," you blink. "For your hair, yes," she hisses, "and knees technically." Another woman claims she massages her scalp nightly with warm mustard oil and vibratory hammering. You don't ask what that means. You simply nod conspiratorially. Then comes the letter. It's written in slanted ink by your cousin Isabel, the one who always gets the latest thing first. She's been attending secret sessions with a new hair doctor, Dr. Mordell, who offers cellular excitation via scalp injections. "It stings terribly," she writes, "but I swear my temples are darker already. It's like my childhood fringe is creeping back." You stare at the letter for a long time. That night, while applying your usual tonic, you wonder, is this truly about hair, or is it about defiance? Because hair, this flimsy, fluttering thing, holds more than just pigment. It holds memory, emotion, youth, the parting your mother once brushed before school, the curl that once bounced when you laughed, the braid that made you feel invincible at 16. Every strand is a timeline, and to lose it feels somehow like time speeding up. So you brush and you massage, and yes, when no one's looking, you talk softly to your scalp, as if encouraging it from sleep, and perhaps you're imagining it. But at the roots, where your part once widened with quiet shame, there are fine little hairs, new, pale, soft as moth wings. You touch them gently, and you smile. Because in a world obsessed with holding on, sometimes the bravest thing is to believe in growing back. It arrives in the post one foggy Thursday morning, a thick envelope wrapped in plain brown paper and stamped discreetly in red ink. Private, for the energetic lady. Inside, nestled in tissue paper like fine lace, is a belt. Not the kind for holding up skirts or defining waists. No, this is something else entirely. A thick leather strap fitted with copper studs, cloth-covered wires, and a curious crank on one side. Attached is a small folded leaflet titled "The Home Galvanic Vibratory Belt. Restore your zest without disturbing the nervous system." You sit in your parlour chair, turning it over in your hands. It buzzes faintly when you twist the crank. There's a soft whirring sound, followed by an inconsistent but determined tremble, like a mouse politely asking to be noticed. The pamphlet promises a host of benefits: revived circulation, improved digestion, reduction of facial slackness, and, curiously, reawakening of forgotten sensations. You raise an eyebrow, then read on. These were the miracle tools of the day, Victorian vitality machines sold through catalogues, with diagrams that featured flushed-cheeked women smiling politely as small electric boxes pulsed cheerfully on their thighs or abdomens. You had ordered this one on a dare of sorts, a quiet challenge to yourself after reading Lady Hornsley's breathless testimonial in the Woman's Weekly Curative. I wear my vibratory belt each afternoon. It has quite replaced my need for naps, or suitors. So now here you are, in your sitting room mid-morning, wearing a belt that hums softly against your corset stays. At first, the sensation is odd, not unpleasant. A gentle quiver beneath your petticoats. You feel your belly tremble slightly, as if in laughter you haven't earned. The motion travels through your back, your hips, your thighs. It's strangely invigorating, like a secret your body's remembered before your mind has. You twist the crank again, a stronger pulse. You grip the arms of the chair and blink. You understand now why they called it a restorative. Later, walking through the park, your cheeks glow, not from rouge, not from embarrassment, but from something else entirely, a kind of internal breeze, a quiet aliveness. You pass a pair of young women gossiping by the duck pond. One adjusts her bonnet and mutters, "She's glowing like she swallowed spring." You smile to yourself, let them wonder. At home, you tuck the belt away in a velvet pouch and slide it beneath your bed. You'll bring it out again tomorrow, after lunch perhaps, when the day begins to sag and the windows seem dull. But this isn't about scandal, it's about agency, because the Victorians were rarely allowed to say what they wanted outright. Instead, they invented, redirected, delivered vitality by way of gears and buzzers, tonics and tablets. If society wouldn't let them name their hunger, they would treat it quietly, one pulse at a time. You sip your tea, back straight, hands steady, and for once you don't feel tired, not even a little. You begin to notice it everywhere. Not the belts themselves, those are always hidden, tucked discreetly beneath skirts and smiles, but the look, the unmistakable flush of the cheeks, the brighter than usual eyes, the slight upward curve of a woman's mouth when she thinks no one is watching. Mrs. Fairley, who used to slump like an expired flower during Tuesday teas, now sits upright, her posture nearly regal. Lady Fenimore's melancholy, which once lingered in every corner of her voice, seems to have evaporated entirely. She's taken up croquet again, in winter. They never say it aloud, no one ever says it. But there are knowing glances, the occasional adjustment of a waistline, and once, in the milliner's shop, a soft whirring sound beneath a neighbour's shawl that abruptly stopped when she caught you listening. You wonder how many of these women have secret batteries stitched into the lining of their dignity. Not just belts, of course. There are gloves now, buzzing gloves, wired with copper mesh said to tone the fingers and wrists, and the vibrating corset stays, rumoured to press gently against the lower back and improve not just posture, but confidence of movement, whatever that means. You try a few of them. One pamphlet boasts, "The modern woman moves without friction." You test this theory while writing a letter, while trimming a rose, while standing perfectly still and letting the machine hum beneath your ribs. It's less about what it does, really, and more about what it gives you permission to feel: invigorated, animated, awake, and maybe, just maybe, young. Because youth, you've come to understand, isn't only about softness or skin. It's about aliveness, motion, spark. And when the body begins to quiet, the Victorians found ways to jolt it back into conversation, if only for 15 discrete minutes at a time. You attend a luncheon hosted by Mrs. Birchwood, a known collector of galvanic therapies. She serves cold veal and tea infused with cinnamon bark and female root. Between bites, she gestures toward her settee and says, "Try it, dear. It purrs." You sit. It does. And you do feel something. Perhaps not the full charge of youth, but at least a polite knock on its door. That night you light a candle and stand before the mirror. You let your robe slip slightly, revealing the faint impressions the belt has left around your hips. You trace them with your fingers, like a map to a country you haven't visited in years, and then gently you smile, not the careful painted smile of polite society, but a private one, the kind that rises without invitation, because you've discovered something quite valuable in all this, that even in a world ruled by silence, repression, and delicately embroidered lies, there were still women who buzzed quietly beneath their petticoats, who refused to go, still, who refused to surrender sensation, and now you are one of them. You're walking through the Camden Market when a folded handbill flutters toward your feet. You bend, scoop it up and read, "The Golden Cup of Health. Discover the ancient, all-natural elixir within you. Available by appointment only." It's signed Dr. Septimus Langley, and below in finer print, "Practitioner of autogenous therapies. Patient-led rejuvenation at the most personal level." You blink, then blink again, because you've heard whispers, not loud ones. No one talks about this in salons or over lace-trimmed tea cakes. But every so often a reference sneaks through: Lady Tewkesbury's morning devotion, or Miss Linley's internal circulations. Euphemisms, half-jokes, eyebrows raised over goblets of lemon water. You fold the handbill discreetly and tuck it into your reticule. Then you forget about it. Until 2 days later, when a pamphlet slips from your cousin Iris's writing desk as she hunts for a hairpin. You catch a glimpse of the heading: 5 gentle methods for home auto-rejuvenation. You meet her gaze. She says nothing. You say nothing. But later that night you retrieve the handbill and trace the words with your thumb. It's real then. You book the appointment. Dr. Langley's rooms are clean, dim, and heavily perfumed with violets. He wears wire-rimmed spectacles and speaks softly, like a man narrating a lullaby. He welcomes you in, sits you gently in a wing-back chair, and pours you a pale herbal tea before beginning. "There are fluids," he says, "that carry the essence of youth. But the fountain is not out there in the mountains or in bottles. It is within. It always has been." You nod, cautiously. He continues, "In ancient texts from India, Egypt, even Rome, we find records of the same ritual: self-purification, self-reabsorption, the circle closed, the body restoring itself." You try to remain calm. Eventually he explains in more direct terms: urine therapy. He recommends it be taken in the morning, just a few spoonfuls. "It must be fresh," he says. "It must be yours." Your stomach rolls slightly, but you smile faintly, politely. After all, the Victorians believe strongly in natural cures. They consume powdered bones, coal tar, crushed beetles, frog syrup, and tinctures made from boiled moss. Compared to all that, this feels like merely eccentric. He hands you a silver cup and a recipe booklet with calligraphy headings like golden gowns of the gut and radiance through recirculation. You thank him. You leave. You don't speak of it. But the next morning, with the door locked and the curtains drawn, you test it. One spoonful. It is warm, strange, but not as terrible as you expected. You wait, heart pounding. Do you feel younger? Not immediately, but perhaps a little brighter, a little amused, a little unhinged. Still, you understand why others try it. Not because it works, but because it feels like doing something, taking control, reclaiming the body not by feeding it foreign potions, but by closing a loop. You place the cup on your washstand, and for the rest of the day you feel oddly calm, quietly rebellious, because among all the arsenic powders, monkey glands and electric corsets, you've now entered the rarest class of Victorian woman, the kind who drinks her own youth. The secret doesn't last long, not because you tell anyone, of course not, but because secrets, in certain circles, ripple outward on their own. A look, a question, a knowing smile over the rim of a teacup. It begins at Lady Margrave's luncheon. You're seated beside a woman known only as Madame E, an herbalist with a reputation for saying things like, "Lime water is for amateurs," and "my liver hasn't needed external assistance since 1872. You don't mean to say anything, truly. But then the conversation turns to skin clarity, and someone mentions lemon juice, and Madame E lets out a laugh like a peeled apple hitting porcelain. "Oh, darling," she says, fixing you with a strangely precise gaze. "You've started the golden cup, haven't you?" You nearly choke on your radish sandwich. She leans in. You're glowing. Not powdered, not blushed, just recycled. You flush. But she's right. There is something different about you now. Not visible exactly, but present. A quiet confidence. A sensation of being slightly ahead of time, like a clock that ticks a hair faster than the rest. And soon you discover others are doing it too, discreetly, devoutly. There's a woman in your reading group who carries a tiny silver flask with a tulip etched on the side. Another has switched from tea to warm morning water and now recites poetry before breakfast. She claims it keeps the spirit inside the body. You don't press. One woman, rumoured to be the granddaughter of a French surgeon, has started bottling hers and labelling it eau de jeunesse, storing it on her vanity beside rosewater and lilac oil. "For my temples and earlobes," she says serenely, "the most receptive points." You ask no questions, you simply nod, because in this strange, quietly circulating sisterhood, shame is the only thing that ages you. You notice changes too. Your skin, while not transformed, has a clarity that wasn't there before. Your mood feels steadier. A peculiar calm has taken up residence in your chest, like a cat that found a warm patch of sunlight and decided to stay. Is it real? Placebo? Hope? Does it matter? For the first time in months, you stop scrutinizing your own reflection. You simply observe it. With curiosity, not contempt. The lines are still there. But they seem less like flaws now, and more like carvings on a well-loved talisman. That evening, as the lamplight pools gently over your vanity, you reach for your silver spoon and pause. You're not a fool. You're a Victorian woman with a locked drawer full of snail cream, arsenic powder, calf pads, and galvanic belts. You've steam-bathed, facelifted, vibrated, powdered, fasted, electrified, and now completed the circle. Perhaps this is madness, or perhaps it is liberation. You lift the spoon, you sip, you smile, and somewhere deep inside a quiet part of you nods. Yes, still young, still yours. The room smells like soap and steam and something faintly medicinal. You're lying on a padded table, legs draped modestly with linen, while a woman named Nurse Catterley hums Greensleeves and prepares the hose. This, you think, is how youth is earned. With humility, with plumbing. You're here for a colonic purge, or as the pamphlet puts it, internal renewal for the woman of quality, and you are not the first, nor the last. These treatments have quietly swept through the drawing rooms and boudoirs of the well-to-do, advertised as cleansing the chambers of time. Victorian physicians believed the bowels were the seat of all decay. A sluggish intestine, they claimed, invited early wrinkles, dull eyes, mood swings, and worse. But with regular flushing, one might restore youthful vigour, mental clarity, even moral purpose. You stare at the ceiling as Nurse Catterley gently explains the procedure. Warm water only, perhaps a bit of lavender oil if the patient is delicate. You try to smile, you fail. And then it begins. There is a sound, like an overly confident kettle, and a moment later, warmth. Not relaxing warmth, not bath warmth. This is the kind of warmth that makes your toes curl and your dignity retreat behind your kidneys. There we are, Nurse Catterley says cheerfully, adjusting the angle of the tube. Just let the water do the work. The work, you quickly discover, is vigorous. You grip the sides of the table, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or simply ascend to a higher plane of bowel awareness. The sensation is a strange mix of intrusion and relief, as if someone is scrubbing your soul with a sponge. After several minutes, and one humiliating whimper, the water is drained, and you're allowed to repose on a side couch with a flannel blanket and a cup of beef tea. You sip, stunned, light-headed, hollowed out. Nurse Catterley beams. You'll feel like a snowdrop by sundown. And strangely, you do. Not just clean, but emptied. Your thoughts are clearer, your joints ache less, your skin tingles. There's a strange floatiness to your limbs, as if your bones have been lifted from the inside. It's not comfortable, but it is convincing. You return home glowing faintly, carrying a pamphlet titled The Joy of Elimination. It features a chart of bowel moods, from gloomy and forgetful to brisk and luminous, and includes a recipe for intestinal tisane brewed from dandelion root, fennel seeds, and, alarmingly, pickled birch bark. That evening, you steep the tea. You place a warm brick at your feet. You recline in your favourite chair, lighter than you've felt in weeks, and you think, if a youthful spirit can't be conjured through creams, belts, or blood, perhaps it can be washed free. Because the Victorians didn't just fear aging, they feared accumulation, waste, rot, the quiet burden of what the body refused to release. So they flushed, and rinsed, and hosed their way to purity, and now so have you. You gaze out the window at the dusky street and whisper brisk and luminous, and for once you mean it. The next morning you awaken lighter, not just in weight, but in thought, in breath. There's a kind of eerie clarity that settles into your joints, as though some shadow has been cleared from behind your eyes. Your first steps are springy. Your waist feels untroubled. You eat nothing for breakfast, and not because you're fasting, but because you simply don't want to spoil the feeling of being emptied. And so begins your quiet devotion to the purge. It isn't daily. That would be madness. But once a week, you return to Nurse Catterley's parlour, with its folded towels and polished copper taps. You nod respectfully at the other women in the waiting room, rarely speaking, never meeting each other's eyes for too long. You're bound together by something stronger than words. Not every woman comes for beauty. Some come for digestion, others for melancholy. One woman, trembling slightly as she adjusts her bonnet, whispers that she hadn't had a clear thought since 1886, until the water came. By your third session, the process feels almost ceremonial. You no longer flinch. You breathe through it. You picture your worries sliding down a drain somewhere far away. You emerge with flushed cheeks and a stomach so flat, your corset sighs with relief. You begin keeping a journal, not of events, but of clarity. You log the moments when your thoughts feel sharpest, when your skin takes on that porcelain calm, when you notice a certain angle of your jaw returning in the mirror, a tiny curve of the past, reappearing. You stop drinking coffee, start each day with fennel tea and a spoonful of slippery elm paste. You decline rich dinners. You develop a peculiar craving for boiled carrots. At one luncheon, when Lady Chellingworth bemoans her fatigue, you say softly, "It might be your lower intestine." She looks at you, startled. "You think?" You glance down into your barley broth. "I know." The others at the table fall silent. They know too. Word spreads quietly. A physician in Belgravia begins advertising hydrointestinal restoration. A footman discreetly requests time off to escort his mistress to a trusted establishment. In certain circles, taking the waters no longer refers to a visit to Bath, but to the careful angle of a porcelain basin and a copper pipe. And yet, not everyone approves. One reverend's wife denounces the trend as an unnatural violation of divine plumbing. A certain dowager faints at the mere mention of lavender flush. A letter to the Ladies' Quarterly warns of losing one's womanly softness through too much voiding. You smile as you fold the letter into squares and tuck it behind the coal scuttle. You know better. Because in a world full of things you can't control, weather, wrinkles, time, husbands, there is power in being able to release something, to choose what stays in and what must go. You light your bedside candle, slip beneath the sheets, and feel a rare, profound stillness settle into your limbs. A stillness without pressure, without burden. And as you drift towards sleep, you murmur the words you've come to live by. Clean body, clear mind, young forever. You're reclining in a stiff-backed armchair at a literary salon, halfway through a lukewarm cup of cardamom tea, when the conversation turns, as it so often does, to the East. Not the East where real people live, breathe and toil. No, this is the Victorian East, trimmed down to fantasy and filtered through imperialism. The Orient, they call it, like it's a painted screen or a scented shawl. Exotic, mystical, and, if Lady Quimbley is to be believed, eternally young. "I saw her myself," she says, lowering her voice to just above a whisper. "A Siamese princess, skin like milk glass. Not a day over 30 and she's nearly 60. They bathe in rice water, you know, and meditate. They barely eat meat." You smile politely. You've heard this before. You've read it before. In beauty columns, in travelogues written by bored aristocrats, in lectures delivered by men who stayed 2 nights in Bombay and returned home as sages. They speak with certainty about places they barely saw, practices they didn't understand, and women they probably never met. And yet the myth persists. The East as a fountain of youth. Lady Quimbley fans herself. And they never wrinkle, not like us. It's the spices, I suspect, or the sea air, or perhaps they simply know something we don't. Another woman nods. "I've started drinking turmeric in warm milk. The girl at the grocer says it's Ayurvedic." Someone else chimes in. "Have you tried the Chinese pearl powder? They say it clears the liver and makes your teeth shine like moonlight." You sip your tea slowly. No pearls in your mouth yet, but you have tried the rice water and the guava leaf rinse, and a version of a cleansing ceremony passed down through at least 5 women with increasingly questionable connections to an actual source. Because beneath all this theatre, there's a kernel of something real. The Victorians were desperate for a magic they couldn't find at home, for a solution that didn't involve scalp pricks or arsenic tonics, and so they turned outward. They turned east. You remember once receiving a packet of Oriental beauty dust, an off-white powder wrapped in silk. You sprinkled it on porridge for a month. It tasted like crushed roses and chalk. Nothing happened, but you kept the silk, because at the end of the day, much of this fascination wasn't about efficacy, It was about hope with fragrance. To imagine that somewhere, far away, someone knew how to stay young without effort, that it was cultural, genetic, inherent, that all you needed was the right oil, the right breath, the right mantra, that you could purchase it, inhale it, assimilate it. It was never youth they sought from the East. It was effortless youth. Youth without corsets, without needles, without noise. Back in the salon, Lady Quimley is now describing something she calls bamboo tapping, which allegedly lifts the face if done while chanting. A younger woman scribbles it down, eyes wide. You fold your napkin, smile faintly, and wonder how many far-off women are laughing behind their fans at the thought of British ladies slapping their cheeks with sticks and calling it ancient wisdom. But you understand it too, because in a world where nothing works quite as promised, it's easier to believe that someone else, somewhere else, has the answer, and maybe, just maybe, they'd be willing to share it. You return home with a new sense of purpose, and a silk pouch of mystery herbs gifted to you by Madame E, who insists they must be boiled under moonlight and consumed before speaking aloud. She's not joking. You follow the instructions with theatrical solemnity. You draw the curtains, light a single beeswax candle, and stir the herbs into hot water while whispering absolutely nothing. The smell is sweet and faintly floral, with an undertone of something you can only describe as shoe polish from Calcutta. You sip slowly, waiting for your cheeks to glow or your spine to tingle. Nothing. But in the morning, your dreams feel cleaner. That's something. Over the next week, you add oriental practices to your existing regimen. Not all at once. That would be vulgar. But gradually, like a woman slipping into silk gloves one finger at a time. You light incense while brushing your hair, convinced that the scent of sandalwood is somehow realigning your chakras, which you don't entirely understand. You begin kneeling on the carpet each evening, palms open, eyes closed, meditating not because it calms you, but because a woman in the Lady's Companion said it restores magnetism to the skin. You even order a jade roller from a catalogue. It arrives in a lacquered box wrapped in tissue and mystery. You drag it across your cheeks with slow reverence. Does it work? Probably not. But it feels like it should. And in the kingdom of youthful illusions, that's more than enough. Of course, not everyone is so restrained. At the bath assembly rooms, one woman now carries an ivory fan carved with Hindu symbols she cannot pronounce. Another insists her new diet, consisting entirely of mango pulp, coconut water, and tiny cubes of smoked eel, has been certified by Buddhist monks. You doubt it. You say nothing. Because underneath the flowing scarves and borrowed rituals lies something deeper, a longing not just to be young, but to be untouched by time, class, and consequence. These women aren't simply chasing youth. They're chasing otherness, a version of femininity unspoiled by European harshness, a version they've never met, but desperately need to believe in. And in doing so, they wrap their aging fears in fabric and fantasy. It's easier, somehow, to believe that wisdom lies across the ocean, in temples and gardens you'll never see, than to admit that your own youth is not recoverable. Only mimicked, only hoped for. Still, you press on. You blend turmeric with cream and apply it as a face mask. You buy a tiny brass bell, which you ring each morning after applying your guava serum. You repeat the words tranquility and rejuvenation like incantations. And every now and then, when you catch your reflection just right, warm light, soft focus, you swear you see something there. Not just beauty, not just youth, but mystery, an unplaceable glimmer, a story that doesn't quite belong to you, and yet makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, your face could be timeless. You blow out the incense, you bow to the empty room. You believe the sun has barely risen. but already your day has begun with a brush, a bristle, and a firm upward stroke. You're dry brushing your entire body from ankles to collarbone as prescribed by the youthful form almanac for ladies. Not for exfoliation, not for elegance, but for circulation, for vital essence, for the blood to flow like a fountain of eternal girlhood. The mirror shows your skin pinking with each sweep. You wince slightly at the roughness, but remind yourself, beauty is rarely gentle. Not in this era. After all, the Victorians were devotees of friction, believing that youth could be summoned through rubbing, slapping, pummeling and tapping. If the skin flushed red, it was working. If it stung, even better. Vitality, they claimed, lived just beneath the surface and needed only a bit of coaxing to rise. You descend to the parlour, where the morning maid has laid out your vibration belt. Yes, the belt. It loops around your hips like a snake preparing for murder. You step into it, gripping the brass handles and flip the switch. The machine begins to hum, a sound like a polite earthquake, then begins its assault. Your teeth chatter, your bones rattle, your thighs quiver like aspic, and still you endure because you've read the pamphlets. Vibratory stimulation encourages lymphatic renewal. Fat melts beneath consistent agitation. The shaking woman never wrinkles. You believe these things because to not believe them would be to question the hours, years, you've spent jiggling for youth. Upstairs, your neighbour has installed a Swedish massage apparatus that looks more like a torture rack than a beauty device. Straps dangle ominously from metal arms. She swears by it. You just lie there, she says, and let it knead your sins out. Another friend swears by skin slapping, 30 minutes a night with a velvet paddle. It lifts the cheek and corrects the jawline, she claims, before demonstrating a technique that looks more like discipline than beauty. You try this once. The sound alone haunts you for days. Still, the idea is compelling, that the body can be woken up, that youth is not lost but simply asleep beneath layers of laziness. And so you scrub, you slap, you roll across textured mats said to stir the energies of the spine. You hang upside down for 5 minutes each morning, feet hooked into a leather contraption nailed to your closet beam. You have not been still in weeks. Because motion, in this world, is medicine. The salons echo with chatter about blood movement, tissue rejuvenation and energetic agitation. It's no longer about what you eat or drink, but how often you bounce. At dinner parties, ladies compare their bruises like medals. Oh, the inner thigh. That's the belt. This here? My Swiss pummeler? Isn't it marvellous? You nod. Smile. Sip your broth through barely steady hands. You haven't sat calmly in days. Even reading is now done on a vibrating chair. But you feel something different. A tingling, a sharpness in the jaw, a soreness in places you didn't know existed, and yes, a kind of aliveness. By week's end, you can hardly tell if the quivering in your limbs is from excitement or exhaustion. You lie in bed at night and still feel your thighs humming faintly from the day's vibration therapy. The mattress itself seems to pulse beneath you, though it's probably your imagination, or possibly the lingering aftershock of the oscillating saddle you mounted for 20 full minutes earlier that afternoon. You used to find stillness in silence. Now silence feels suspicious. You long for the whir of the machine, the clank of gears, the intimate buzz of metal against muscle. And you're not alone. Every woman in your circle has become an amateur engineer of movement. Some swear by mechanical stirrers, others by steam-powered tappers, and one famously eccentric widow has a foot pedal device that rotates her hips in slow, pendulum-like sweeps as she knits shawls by the fire. Motion has become the new tonic, the new sermon, and there's a reason for it, an idea nestled deep in the bones of the Victorian mind. that stagnation is decay, that if you stop moving, your blood thickens, your mind dulls, and your face begins its slow collapse into history. The newspapers now advertise portable jolters, little hand-cranked boxes you can strap to your waist while walking, stimulate the kidneys while attending tea, maintain posture through powered tremors. The illustrations show ladies mid-promenade with flushed cheeks and oddly rigid smiles. One woman even straps a rotating bristle pad to her corset and calls it internal brushing. You don't ask questions. You begin to see youth not as a softness, but as resistance. The ability to endure vibration, to rebound from slapping, to spring back, flushed and vital after every assault of motion. It becomes a kind of sport. You challenge your own thresholds. 12 minutes on the belt becomes 20. You up the speed dial of your facial kneader. Your nightly dry brushing takes on the discipline of a monk scrubbing for penance. And you feel it. Your skin is taut. Your eyes are bright. You haven't caught a head cold in months. The dull ache in your spine is somehow invigorating, like your body constantly reminding you, yes, I'm still alive. At gatherings, you can now spot the women who've joined the movement, as someone cheekily dubbed it. There's a shine to their eyes, a faint ruddiness in the cheek. They sit straight. They sip lightly. Their corsets, though tight, seem worn like armour. And when a conversation turns to age, as it always does, these women don't flinch. One even smiles, slow and conspiratorial. Motion, she says, is the only fountain of youth that doesn't run dry. You laugh with the others, because you felt it too, that pulsing beneath your skin, that friction-born clarity, the sharp breath after a session, the delicious soreness, the echo of life bouncing through you like a drumbeat. You're no longer chasing stillness, you're vibrating toward youth. The air smells like lemon soap and rosehip oil as you slip into your final ensemble of the week. White lace gloves, a pale blue walking gown, and a delicate netted veil over your brow, secured with mother-of-pearl pins. Your face glows, partly from the gentle morning light, and partly from last night's final experiment. A cold cream infused with powdered amber and diluted essence of raven's wing. The instructions said nothing about the wing, only that it must be black, iridescent, and ethically sourced from a spiritualist taxidermist. You obliged. Now, as you descend into the street for your walk, you carry not only your parasol, but also a small glass bottle of rosewater mist in your handbag. Just 3 sprays every half hour to retain facial dew. You read that in a column titled Vapour and Vanity. This is not indulgence anymore. This is discipline. You've survived arsenic wafers and bee stings. You've dabbled in crocodile oil and elephant bile. You've swallowed vinegar tablets shaped like pearls and floated your feet in bowls of milk and mint. You've slapped, brushed, vibrated, meditated, perspired, inverted, and exhaled, all in pursuit of one thing. Not to be young again, but to never stop seeming young. Because in Victorian society there is no graceful aging, no silver-haired elegance. A woman either defies time or disappears. You pass by the milliner's window and catch your reflection, soft, alert, framed by fashionable disdain. You could be 25, you could be 45, you could be any age at all, and that's the trick. Not to reverse time, but to blur it, to slip through its fingers like chiffon in a breeze. You meet Lady Arkwright outside the grocer. She's dressed in pale lavender, her hair upswept and pinned with tiny glass violets. She leans in conspiratorially. "I hear they're injecting lamb fetus broth in Vienna," she whispers, directly into the cheeks. 200 guineas. You nod solemnly, not entirely surprised. By now, nothing surprises you. If someone told you youth could be summoned by reciting sonnets at pickled piglets under the full moon, you'd ask only, how many sonnets? This has become your life's project. You've moved beyond the vanity of corsets and creams. This is the engineering of time. You're now the architect of illusion, a curator of agelessness. At lunch, you order crushed ice and lemon slices with fresh thyme. You read a pamphlet on facial reflexology while dipping sugar cubes in rosewater. Around you, other women compare notes on a new salon device that uses electronerve excitement to restore the collagen of girlhood. You make a mental note to try it, but there's a moment, just one, when your hand trembles as you lift the spoon. It's so slight that no one sees it, but you feel it. A reminder, quiet and sharp as the tip of a hatpin, that your youth is not actually eternal. Only the illusion is. You sit straighter, adjust your veil, mist, your cheeks. Because the real secret to staying young in Victorian England, never let them see you pause. That evening, you linger longer in the mirror, not out of fear, not out of vanity, but reverence. Your face, lit by the golden hush of gaslight, holds the memory of countless potions, experiments, and whispered rituals. Your eyes flicker not with innocence, but with mastery. You're no longer chasing youth. You've become its steward. Each wrinkle you've smoothed, each pulse you've jostled, each puff of powder and dab of honey water, these weren't desperate acts. They were rituals of resistance, carefully choreographed against the slow turning of the century's wheel. You think of the others, Lady Elsbeth with her nightshade tonics, Mrs. Warrington, who swears that a single drop of cobra gall beneath the tongue gives her the energy of a girl again. That poor soul who tried the electricity bonnet and hasn't blinked quite the same since. You smile, not smugly, not cruelly, but in solidarity. Because every woman you know has tried something odd, something risky, something that made her believe, even for a second, that she could hold on to herself. And maybe that's the most Victorian part of it all, not the powders, or potions, or pulleys, but the sheer, stubborn hope of it. The belief that time can be reasoned with, or at least tricked into slowing down. You remove your gloves slowly, one finger at a time. Your vanity table is a museum now. Rows of bottles, brushes, silk scarves and marble jars. You reach for a tiny one, no larger than a thimble. Inside, a cold cream you made yourself. Beeswax, lavender oil and a secret ingredient you'll never confess. You apply it with slow, upward strokes, not out of panic, not out of need, but as a benediction, a way of saying to your own reflection, you're still here, and you're still mine. Later you slip between the sheets. You think about all the things you've done to stay young, and how some worked, some didn't, and some were simply wonderful theatre. And you decide, quite suddenly, that maybe youth was never in the skin at all. Maybe it lived in the act, in the choice to try, in the defiance of giving up. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest in the knowing that you tried every odd, brilliant, half-mad, lemon-scented idea that promised one more season of spring. And somehow, you made them all yours. And now, as your thoughts slow to a gentle murmur, let the stories of lace gloves and lemon balms fade softly into the distance. You've wandered through an entire age of velvet rituals and rose-scented illusions, through gaslit parlours and trembling tonic bottles, through women who wouldn't go quietly, who danced with time like it was a stubborn suitor. You've felt the bristles, the sting, the hum of Victorian vanity not as mockery but as memory. Echoes of a time when staying young was both art and obsession. And somehow, as strange as it all, as you understand them a little better now, the hope, the ritual, the quiet defiance in every upward stroke and flick of powder. Let it all melt now. There's nothing left to prove, Nothing left to tighten or smooth or chase. Your own body, right here, right now, is already doing the most beautiful thing, resting. Feel your breath slow. Let your shoulders soften. Let the imagined rustle of silk skirts settle into stillness. And as the echoes of the past fade into the hush of your room, remind yourself you are timeless, not because of elixirs or creams, but because you are here, fully, gently, now. Sleep well.